and welcome to Flight Center Travel Group's Black History Month panel discussion. My name is Teresa Rolack, and I am the Flight Center Travel Group Racial Equity ERG lead. Today, we will be discussing Black perspectives on inclusion in 2024, a dynamic panel exploring a day in the life of Black professionals, emotional tax, and strategies for building and belonging. Today, we have four influential Black professionals who will be joining us on this panel to discuss their experiences. I would like to start by introducing our panelists to you. We have some amazing panelists who are making some large contributions, not only to business, but also as a Black professional in their communities. I'd like to introduce first Linda Bekoe. Linda is an entrepreneur. She started her own business after being in the corporate world for a period of time and found that she felt she could do it better, and she does. She serves as a chief executive officer and founder of About Partners Luxury Brands Collection, acronym APLBC, a globally renowned representation company specializing in delivering unmatched representation services for hotels and apartments. APLBC is equally celebrated for its tailored consultancy services and accessible through its dedicated AP Gigs channel. Now, I want to ask you about that Gigs channel real quick, Linda. What is that exactly?
That gigs is really when we come in and we do a little project and then we go again. So it's a little bit like a task force in a way, but I call it gigs because there was this whole thing a couple of years ago about the gigs economy when people come in, specialize in certain things and then they go out again, which is actually quite nice.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Emese Graham. Emese is our own Flight Center Travel Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager. She is awesome to work with. She's helped me a lot with a lot of things and taught me a lot. She is actually over the Americas in that role, and she was the 2023 recipient of the DEI Leadership Win It Pinnacle Award. Emese's approach to DEI draws from her background in humanities research, marketing, and lived experiences as a queer autistic Black woman. Emese, welcome, and thank you so much for joining the panel today.
Thank you so much. Happy Black History Month. I'm so pleased to be a part of this.
Wonderful. Next, we have the gentleman of the group, Shawn Cole. Shawn Cole is Vice President Global Sales for Delta Airlines. In this role, he is responsible for leading a global sales team focused on maximizing premium revenue and share performance with Delta's commercial account base. Shawn holds a BS in accounting from North Carolina A&T University and earned an MBA from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. Welcome, Shawn. Thank you so much for joining us. And I had to shout out, you went to a HBCU. We have two HBCU graduates on this panel. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's an honor to be here with such distinguished host as well as fellow panelists. So cannot wait to get into it and share the insights and hear the insights from the other panelists. But again, thank you for having me. Looking forward to it. And Aggie pride.
That's right. Next, we have Aliyah D. Powell. She is a conscious and compassionate people developer, consistently seeking enriching and challenging opportunities for high positive impact and growth. Mrs. Powell graduated with honors from Howard University with a degree in international business management. She is the head of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging at Favor Delivery, where she is responsible for driving DEIB and corporate social responsibility strategies impacting customers, contractors, and merchants across Texas and employees across the nation. Aliyah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this discussion today. Happy Black History Month and excited to hear from all the panelists.
My first question I'm going to give to Shawn. You can start the ball rolling with this. As a Black professional, do you feel that you are valued being your authentic self in the workplace? And have you noticed a difference with that in the past few years?
Well, I'm honored that I'll have the first question as the only male here. So I did
Yes.
not set that up.
I figured I'd switch it up.
Random, completely random. One, again, I applaud you for having this panel. I think it's really important that we share the different perspectives and make it open, right? Not only
Right.
for us, but for our colleagues who don't look like us or share the same biologics. It is, how do we share? How do we create commonalities? And I love how that last part of your opening is building belonging, because we all want to belong to something, a family, a company with shared values. And I would say is, I've been in corporate America now for over 30 years. It's hard to believe. You blink at an eye and you walked across the stage at North Carolina A&T 30 years ago. I would say that it is absolutely, it's a journey like anything, that there was a lot of conforming. When I first came out, I started working in the early mid 90s. So it's conforming. I remember I had, not to be a joke, but it's reality since I bald now, but I had the Kid and Play high top fade. And one of my colleagues, and somebody in school was like, hey, Shawn, if you want the best job, you're going to have to really shorten your hair to look corporate. And now, as you look at, 2024, it's acceptable to come in with your locks, to look how you want to be. So it is certainly transformed, but it all comes down, and I think a lot of us are going to relate to this. It's all about, are you having impact? If you are hired for X job, are you doing it? That's going to make you valuable no matter what color or ethnicity you're in, but you have to create impact, and then you can sort of bring yourself along. But I do feel value, but it has been a journey over the last 30 years.
Thank you for that, Shawn. That's wonderful. Anybody else want to chime in on that question? Linda, you
I
look
just
like
wanted
you're
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in because, again, like Shawn, I believe that it's been a journey. And, if I look at myself like 20 years ago, my hair had to be a certain way. I had to dress a certain way. I had to have the outfit a certain way. But I think that as you grow with confidence and knowing your subject matter, you get to the point where you're like, I know I'm pretty good at this. So, you kind of like start to evolve within yourself, because it's only been the last 2 years that I've started to even be comfortable with my natural hair, and that's something that I should have been comfortable with, but I just felt that the corporate world wasn't ready for that. So I definitely think that, one, it's building confidence in yourself, but also I think society's changed as well, and it's become a little bit more accepting.
wonderful. Aliyah, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I love this question because I think it's bringing up the concept of value is really interesting, especially when you look at it from the lens of, DEI work. I think, for a lot of us, it's coming in and, you're kind of told you have to prove your value. And I think for most professionals, when they're in early career, regardless of their background, that's essentially what they're being told. I think what's unique to Black professionals is you find yourself needing to do that over and over and over and over again, right? And so I think everyone can kind of relate to that experience of, after a while, no matter how many credentials you have or how much work you've done in a certain space, if you enter an environment or an interaction with a new person, you kind of feel at some times like you're starting from scratch. And so I think, for me, I absolutely feel valued in being my authentic self, but I think part of that goes back to what we were talking about before, which is, right, it's building that confidence and it's coming in and after some time feeling, hey, how I show up and being authentic to me is actually a value add to the situation. And that's where the value comes from in the first place. And so really being able to tap into that and being able to trust in that, I think makes a huge difference.
I think my experience is really similar to Aliyah's, like probably because we're in the same, field. But I found that it was, thinking about 2020, thinking about the shift in consciousness and awareness about anti-Black racism, after George Floyd was killed, a lot of organizational change happened. We heard a lot of, we're listening, we're doing something, and a lot of industries, you really recognize the need for marginalized people, especially, to be taking the lead in the space in terms of leading those conversations and leading those policy changes. So, I really think that nobody knows how racism works as well as people who are racialized. Nobody knows how ableism works as well as people who have a disability. Nobody knows how homophobia works as well as people who are LGBTQ. And so I think, like Aliyah is saying about, it wasn't just, come as you are, accept you, whatever, but now it's also recognizing the value in that, the knowledge that we have, from understanding experientially how systems of oppressions work, what changes specifically actually need to be made. So it's sort of like a years of experience type of thing. Not to say that, if someone's not marginalized in a certain way that they can't learn, of course, but it's just sort of, when you're speaking from that perspective, I'm seeing a shift of, especially since 2020, where that's something that organizations are really valuing when it comes to what are the real concrete changes that we need to make and put in place, to move our industry forward and to make it, more fair and more inclusive, and to really ensure that people are experiencing that sense of belonging that we're talking about.
Thank you, Emese. That's wonderful. I love that. I love that everyone had a different take, but there are so many underlying similarities between everything that people experience. There's a lot of commonalities of being a Black professional, and it shows through. But then at the same time, it's a lovely thing that everything is unique to the person, even though you can identify with everything. So the next question that I want to ask is, have you experienced emotional tax, and how has it shown up in your career? And just for our viewers, I just want to tell everyone what emotional tax is. Emotional tax has been defined as the mental and physical impacts on members of marginalized groups due to constant discomfort that comes with protecting themselves against bias. Experience of feeling different, plus being on guard against microaggressions and bias. How does it show up in your professional career as well as when you travel, or when you travel professionally or leisurely? How does that emotional tax show up if you've experienced it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. For one, I think when we think about emotional tax, there's the addition of, on top of I'm investing in doing my work and doing my work well, there's that addition of I'm also at the same time being drained and depleted for a number of reasons that relates back to my identity, and the way that I need to show up in regards to my work. So, I think we've all kind of heard you need to work twice as hard, or you need to be twice as excellent or twice as perfect. And so, there is an emotional tax associated with that, right? Like that doesn't come without any sort of harm to you, or to your mental health. And if you're not careful about, really pouring back into yourself and self-care and having a great solid support system, that gets extremely exhausting, especially in any profession as a Black professional. But I'd say, just from my experience, especially in DEI work, where your job is to do those things that for most people, those are the bonus things that they get to do in their day. Um, so it's certainly there. It certainly does show up. I'd say, in terms of, your personal life and traveling. I think if you've ever been in a room where either you are the only person who looks like you in that room, or everyone in the room looks like you, both of those experiences are unique in the sense that you have a heightened awareness of yourself. And so that shows up over and over and over again. And I think, when we think about other populations, whether it's, thinking about the LGBTQ plus community, whether it's thinking about being a person with a disability. I'm a person with a disability, and I often will travel, and I like to travel and check out the accessible rooms, because oftentimes they're not very accessible. And so I'll check them out, and I like to give my feedback and have conversations. I've had to travel with a service animal before on airlines, and so I think all of those things, right? It gives you, one, that heightened awareness, but two, there is an emotional tax attached to that, whether it's showing up as a person who has an invisible disability, and there's perceptions there, right? or if it's just going through your day-to-day at work and battling those same exact things, whether it's in your personal life or at work.
Thank you, Aliyah. Linda, how about you?
I think from my perspective, and it's interesting because, the Black excellence is it's instilled in us right from, I think, when we're born. You have to work harder, you have to be better, and I think every parent says that. So it's constantly in your head, and I'm quite careful not to pass it on to my son, but I find myself saying the same thing. It's like, I think it's generational, but anyway, I think that makes us show up in a completely different way. I think for me, one of the key things, especially when it comes to travel, and I talk about this a lot, is that I sometimes feel that we're not represented in a way, whether it's through advertising or whether through different things. And I think that's something that the industry is slowly starting to work on. But I think, I find myself, even in this day and age, sometimes constantly being the only person in the room. And I think it does get extremely exhausting, because I always tell people that it's like you're on show, and you constantly have to show up very bubbly, very happy, and that is draining. Like, people always say, "Oh, Linda, you always look so happy," but I have it in my head psychologically that I'm always on stage. So that's how people need to buy me before they're going to do business with me. So, I will go the extra mile and look at the LinkedIn and see what's going to relate with people. What are the latest topics? So I always feel that I need to know my subject matter so that I'm seen as an expert and not necessarily, the color of my skin. Or so it can be quite taxing. But I think that also it enables us, and if you're driven, you end up learning so much, and you get into a room and you know so much and you can relate to everybody. So yes, it's taxing, but I think that if you train your mind in such a way, it will give you the ability to even get an advantage.
That's a nice way to look at it. Very good perspective. Thanks, Linda. Emese.
Have I experienced emotional attacks? Of course. Of course. I think honestly for me, it's most prominent when it comes to, the MySpace meeting, conferences, events, where I'm traveling and, I'm speaking from, like, I can only speak from my own experiences, and that's sort of like at the intersection of, being queer and autistic and Black and a woman. So, since I can't detangle all of those things, I'm just speaking from that. So for me, that's where the space where I definitely feel the highest level of emotional tax, because I'm already, depleted from the crowds. I'm already depleted from the sensory environment of the traveling, from the socializing that I have to do in those spaces. And then on top of that, thinking about preparing myself for the microaggressions, right? Oh, where are you from? And then I answer, where are you really from? Oh, okay. And then, oh, you're so articulate. And it's like, what does that mean? So thinking about, how am I responding in a way that's, professional, and knowing that my brain is already going through a lot just because of how I got here and the whole thing and the crowds and the sensory stuff anyway. So, for me, like, that's really where I live with emotional tax the most when it comes to my work and in travel and travel experiences. So if people are thinking about a travel program, or thinking about the travel experiences of their people that they're sending out, thinking about how some people are traveling and experiencing emotional tax and that other people are not, and how can we make sure that everybody is supported. And then, of course, there's the added layer too of just on top of just, the sensory everything and the microaggressions, is the safety too, because I don't feel comfortable traveling everywhere as a Black person. I don't feel comfortable traveling everywhere as a queer person. And I'm saying that, understanding that I have a lot of privilege when it comes to, the color of my skin, and colorism is a thing. So I know that people with a darker complexion than me are gonna have even more concerns. I know that people who are, more visibly queer than I am are gonna have more concerns than I do. So it's sort of all of those layers all at once, and thinking about how each one is just adding. So for me, when I'm thinking about, where I experience that the most, it's not so much the day to day, it's the, okay, here we go, we're going to a conference, we're going to a workshop, all of those things. And it just sort of like piles up on top of each other.
Wow. when you say it in those terms and just, say it so plainly, it's a lot to deal with. And a lot of things, like you were saying, a lot of people don't think about. Like they'll just go, oh, I'm going to this place, I'm going to hop on the plane, I'm going to get off. But you have so many layers that you have to peel back when you're traveling. And I've seen Aliyah go through the same type of experience where you have to consider so many different things when some people don't. So that's really a great perspective. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I think people really need to hear that. Shawn, how about you in emotional tax, travel and professional?
Yeah, absolutely. Love the rich dialogue, and I was taking notes because some of the things I want to check off, because you covered a lot of them. I think that emotional tax, and just to lay it on the line for people who don't know, it's called the black tax as well. It's
Yeah.
the only one in the room. I cannot tell you in my nearly 30, or it has been 30 years, my 30 years, I've only been in one meeting, and it's been in the last 2 years, where one white colleague came up to me and he said, Shawn, how does it feel to be the only black person in the room? And that was the first time. But and you guys probably get it as women of color, and you're the only one in the room, the only one on stage. And I love what Linda said. We have this defense, right? That our parents or grandparents or people who really nurtured us and developed us, is to say, hey, you got to be better than. You can't play the victim card. If you act like a victim, you'll be a victim. So you got to have what the British say, that stiff upper lip. And brush aside, are they saying that because I'm black or not? And it can wear on you. The reason it's the emotional tax or black tax is because you can put this front on. Again, I can do it very well. Some of us can do it very well, but you can come home exhausted, or it leads to hypertension or other things because you don't have anybody to talk to. How many other black males can I go talk to about this situation? Was it because I was black, or just because I really didn't do well and I could do better? So yes, I felt all of it. And to travel, I'm, and my colleagues in the airline industry, they got to face it when they're at the gate where somebody is late because of whatever reason, the boarding door is closed and they go off on the poor gate agent, right? And hear all types of derogatory terms. What I have to do, I'm representing Delta, and I'm the only person of color on stage, and I got to make sure I'm there, making sure that I carry extra, shirts just in case I get soup on there, because I don't want to seem like I'm out of fashion or I'm sloppy. So it's all of those things that go in there, but you have to work up this kind of thick skin, or have a relief outlet that you can go talk to kind of re-energize yourself, to keep going at it for the next day and tomorrow. And what I do is I like wrapping my arm around people that are younger than me and kind of help shed some light on it and let them know they have a safe space to come talk to somebody about it.
That's wonderful. That's great, Shawn. It's so important to give back to those younger people and let them know that it can be done and that they have someone in their corner. Um, and that brings me to another point. Shawn just talked about what he likes to do. What do you do for an outlet? Because I know we can have a day that's crazy and we're so suppressed because emotionally we don't, and I can speak only from my experience. Many times emotionally we don't show up in the office because our emotions can be seen as um, aggressive, or people may be uncomfortable. So we have to really watch how we say, what we say, how we say it, our mannerisms, things of that nature. What do you do to decompress after all this emotional tax? Emese, I'm gonna give you that first.
Yeah, you know what? I do a lot of things. It's there's a lot you can do with rage, to be honest. Like I think when I look at when I like if I'm traveling just myself, and I'm seeing like, just injustice, just unfairness, just looking at, for example, being in the Caribbean and looking how the economy is and looking how, how unfair things is. Part of what I do after I have a good cry is like, okay, what can I do about it? You know what I mean? Honestly, I have to channel it into action. Otherwise, I'm just gonna, implode. So part of it is I need to do something productive with it and trying to make a change and doing the thing. And the other part is rest. I think it's so powerful for people, especially people who've been, brought up with the Black excellence ideal, just to rest and to really value that. And so I think that's important. I think doing art, honestly, is really important, and walking and connecting with other people who get it. I think all of those things, and just, leaning into community and leading into action, because otherwise, I think it can be really easy to feel like it's just so much, we have to let release some of that, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Emese. Linda, what do you do?
I think for me, I have to say I feel quite blessed because I've got a good support team. So I'm somebody that I probably talk to my mother like 10 or 15 times a day, and she always has this really good way of letting me see the other side or calming me down, because I can get so frustrated and every time, because obviously Linda's my English name, but my name is Nake, which is Nakoshi. And then she'll be like, Nake, just calm down. Yeah, it's just a day. It's just what? But she has this way of just talking to me that just kind of like, calms me down and makes me see that there's no point in being so angry because the other person has moved on. And that's what she always tells me, the other person has moved on. So you need to find like another way. And another thing is, for me, one of my key goals at the moment is when it comes to even the DE&I aspect and, GBTAs, how can we use our voice? And that's one thing that I am trying very hard to do, is to use my voice. And I look at it as, even if one person hears something that I'm saying and makes a change, it's a movement. And I think the more we talk about things, the more we let people know how people are feeling and how it's important to make people belong, then at least we're making a change. But we have to talk about it. And that's my goal, is to use my voice and make sure that if I have any platform, I push people onto that platform.
Wonderful. Aliyah, what do you do to
Yeah,
decompress?
so I think there have been some fantastic recommendations so far. I mean, I'm in no way an expert at this, and work in progress, but I did learn, I'd say two things that I think have worked for me. One, I had a coach who really just so significantly helped me, in so many ways. But one thing that she recommended, turning routines into rituals. And so, when you're super busy, as probably all of us are on the call, and you can barely find that time for self care, what are the things that you do every single day that you have to do every single day, and finding a way to turn that into a joyful experience? So, like for me, that's like in the morning, lighting a gratitude candle, and before I blow it out, thinking of something I'm grateful for. Or, and then the other thing is seeing joy as a form of protest. I mean, these are tough, tough days that we all have to have. And some people don't want you to be happy. They just don't.
Yeah.
They don't want to see you win, right? So when you win and when you're happy, that's a form of protest too. And so, really leaning into that and just embracing the joyful moments, embracing the little things, I think makes a huge difference.
That's nice. And Shawn, what about you personally? I know you mentor in the workplace, but how do you decompress when you walk away from Delta every day?
So and I've had this for years, when I go home, I try to separate work from my personal life. And again, it may sound strange, but I may have to pick up the laptop when I'm at home, but I don't really talk about work to my family. They know my coworkers, but I'm not sitting there bringing work home. And it really helps create a wall, and it creates my happy place, because I don't want it to interfere. I think somebody told me a long time ago, right? I can't come home and be mad and kick my dog because of something happened at work. So I don't have any pets at home, and I certainly wouldn't kick one if I had one. But it just meant like, hey, separate work from your personal life.
Right.
And it's really worked for me really well. Because again, I think you said it well, Aliyah, like nobody's going to take my happiness. As the young kids say, right? Why am I going to let them rent space in my head rent free? And I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
Like, I want to have my joy. I want to have that decompression, because one of the things I don't want to do is stress out, have high blood pressure, all of that stuff. So that's one of the ways that I take care of it for myself. Because the other key two-word answer was self-care. You gotta focus on yourself. You have to focus on yourself for that self-care.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shawn. Okay, this question is for Linda. What barriers do you have when it comes to connections within the workplace, and how do you bridge those gaps?
Let me see, barriers. And how do I bridge them? I think I'm somebody that I like to think a lot about every possible situation. And I hate to say this, but when it comes to any barriers or anything confrontational, I will probably step away and kind of like say very little in that sense, because I believe that if you see a situation or you see barriers, I will not try to change that person's mind on the spot. I need to go back, think about it, think about why the barrier is there, think about why maybe that person has their own biases, and then maybe find another way of approaching it. So I always step back, think about how can I approach this in a different way. And that's how I've always dealt with every situation. I always try to put myself in that person's shoes. Why are they saying this? Why are they doing this? Why are they putting these barriers or these boundaries there? And then just try and find a solution. I always find that if you approach somebody, as Aliyah said, with happiness or love, the way they behave towards you is a little bit different to if you approach them with aggression.
Agreed. Agreed. Emese, how about you? How do you deal with the connections or the lack of connections in the workplace?
I mean, I think for me, the main barrier to connection is just geography. Like, I'm here in
Oh,
Canada being super jealous of all the like Black travel professional networks I see across the border. I'm like, what? What am I just doing over here? Not that there's nothing here, but honestly, it's just space, it's just location. And so, I think one of the things that like I'm excited about that we brought to Flight Center Travel Group. Maybe Teresa, if you want to speak about it a bit more, is just our racial equity employee resource groups, because it's spanning the Americas, Canada, USA,
yes.
and Mexico, and it gives us all a chance to sort of connect with each other, whatever time zone, whatever region we're a part of. And so I think that's really helpful for me. I can feel like, all right, like it sort of helps to build community across that space.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm so happy that we were able to get those ERGs off the ground. Emma Show was so instrumental in that and guided us along the way. And it really has made a difference with us being able to collaborate with each other. Even the people of color that are in our company, um, Emma's is doing some great like analytic stuff as well. But even people that I met, we had an America's Ball and it happened to be in Canada last year. And I met a lot of people of color who are very, very interested in the ERG. And maybe they might not have time to join or may not be able to make a meeting, but they'll ping me every now and then and say they're happy that we have it. It's something that they feel could be a safe space for them. So that is a wonderful call out, Emma, how that brought us together. Shawn, what about those barriers in the workplace? How do you handle those?
I look more at opportunities, not necessarily as barriers. What can I do to close those gaps and seams? And you talked about the business resource groups or those communities that you guys have built. always said when I was at my previous employer, and certainly say it now at Delta, it's good and I love it. I'm executive sponsor of our business resource group, which is called Bold at Delta. The big group settings are really great, but those really valuable conversations happen one-on-one or 1-on-3 or 1-on-4, especially with people you don't know. So how do you close those gaps and don't, make excuses and point the finger at somebody else? What am I doing? And that's where I see the opportunities. And again, I'm not saying if you've made an attempt and nobody wants to connect with you, that's their problem, not your problem, right? And the thing is I think that people, they want to generalize and stereotype so much and say, well, just using myself, like, man, I tried to go out and reach out to Shawn and he couldn't show me the time of day. So now all bald black guys are that way. No, that's Shawn's issue, right?
Right.
So you got to go out there and close those gaps on your own. And I think that's, I had great mentors who really helped me along the way. And that's what I did, because you got to go out there and put in the effort. And speaking of travel, I picked this up many years ago when I worked at Delta. The most amount of energy that you spend in air travel is on takeoff, right? Because of physics, because of gravity. Meaning it wants to keep you on the ground, but you gotta spend a lot of energy to take off, and then it gets smoother at cruising altitude. So you got to put in the work. So I put it on what can I do differently to close those gaps and make those connections.
I like that analogy. That was a great analogy about the energy it takes for takeoff and leveling out on cruising altitude and how much energy you have to put in to bridge those gaps. I really like that analogy, Shawn. How about you, Aliyah? What about the barriers when it comes to connections in the workplace? How do you handle those?
Yeah, I mean, I think so I'm fortunate at Favor. I think we have really fantastic core values that really make driving DEIB just intrinsic to that. But I'd say in general, and I think any person who works in this space can kind of relate to this, you're always going to have the issue of everyone just being at a different spot in their journey. And so, I think a big part of that is just meeting people where they're at. I mean, I think, Linda kind of said this when she shared, but you're tracking more bees with honey, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's really about, trying to, and a lot of people say assume positive intent. I'm on the side of make no assumptions. That's where I come in. That's how I come into a situation. Whether your intent is positive or not, I am going to make zero assumptions, and I'm going to come in just prepared to learn about what your experience is, what your background is, where you're coming from. Because all of those things, whether it's conscious things or unconscious biases, these are all contributing to how we communicate, how we connect. So I think it's, when we talk about barriers, it's more so just a disconnect that we need to really meet people where they're at and figure out how to your point, like you said, bridge those gaps, right? But I think it all comes from just approaching the situation with an open mind and being able to build from there.
Thanks, Aliyah. Okay, we have one more question. This question is, what are you doing to elevate Black people in your workplace? Linda, let me give you that one first. Let's answer that first for me.
I think for me, when it comes to my workplace, and I'm going to speak about this in two folds. So if I look at my team generally, I learned so much from my team in regards to, their different backgrounds. What I have done is, especially with my social media, my marketing team, I've actually got people who are either based in Ghana, South Africa, or Nigeria, to really bring them up in that sense, to make sure that they're really aligned to the corporate world. So that's what I'm doing in my company, and also looking at different ways that I can again use my platform, my voice. When it comes to the GBTA aspect, one of my key goals in GBTA, and Teresa, obviously you being vice chair, how passionate I am about making everything global. So
Right.
it's making sure that, the platform is focused on all the regions, because I think that DE&I touches every single region. And if we're going to have a global conversation, we need to ensure that Asia is included. We need to ensure that, Africa is included. So that for me is definitely one of the key things that I'm trying to bring, just using my platform as much as I can. And I also belong to another African Women Association, where we are doing a lot of mentoring with a lot of African girls as well, to try to give them opportunities in the corporate world.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Emese, what do you do to elevate Black people in the workplace?
When I think about like what I'm most proud of, it's things that are like made the material difference. I think, representation is so important. Um, and so is money, so is economic justice, you know what I mean? And so I think the things that I'm most proud
Right.
of are like being able to really develop supplier diversity with some of our leisure brands, like with, FCM, with Corporate Traveler, with our corporate space. We've been able to, for a long time, just sort of have visibility on Black-owned businesses and other marginalized businesses, self-disclose and work with that. And so we needed that space developed more so with our leisure brands as well, and making it easier to connect people with Black-owned businesses and Indigenous-owned businesses as well. And so that was a labor of love, and it was a lot of work and a lot of research, and just a lot that went into developing a program to really partner with Black-owned travel suppliers. And make sure that we're experts in those products, and that when people are looking for any excellent like travel experience, that these are partners that we're pushing forward, and that it's really just about partnership, and so that's the thing that I think is I think so far I'm most proud of, because I know those are the things that makes a material difference.
Right.
And I think, that's an industry-wide project, right? Really just making the industry diverse in the sense that everyone who is participating is benefiting from this industry equally, right? And making sure that we have those metrics and the visibility, and that we know, what levers to pull to increase that where it needs to be increased. Aside from that, the other things are, I think, education is really important. Linda, you mentioned about, or Leah, I don't remember, but meeting people at where they are. And I think so raising sort of a level of understanding of, what are we up against together, and I think if it's us versus racism, that's so much easier, and helping people to understand the issue, understand how systems of oppression actually work, understand, building up cultural competency skills. I think that makes a really big difference in any workplace. I think it's really important too in the travel space, because of course it's cross-cultural. Of course you're going to be exposed to so many different people, and so I think having that training available, especially if you have teams that are traveling all over the world, to really be working on their CQ, their cultural competency, and to really understand that, I think that's really key. And then, Teresa, you mentioned earlier about metrics. I'm such a data nerd, and I think it's so important, because I think, what you measure gets done. And so I love
Yeah.
the part of, DEI work, and the part of, just sort of organizational, holding ourselves accountable, right? Being transparent about the data that we collect, who we are as an organization, our demographics, what we're aiming for, and if there's a gap, being honest about that, publishing that information regularly, and
Right.
allowing people to see the progress, allowing people to join with us on the journey, and making it something that's not a point of competition in the industry, but something that we're all working on together. And I think you can't really do that effectively without having very clear reporting, without having very clear goals, and without allowing people, to be a part of that conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emese. Aliyah, what are you doing to elevate the Black community with your work professionally?
Yeah, I mean, first, just want to completely second everything that Emma just said, because I feel like she's 100% right, like 100% right about that. It's really those little things that you can do that are very much based on those metrics, very much based on making tangible changes any time that I've been able to kind of move the needle on how we do something or the way that it works at our organization, I think that those are really big impacts. And so I think those are the moments where you're most proud, when you're leaning in on the marketplace diversity side of things, and making a difference on the consumer end. So all of those things I think are incredibly important and exciting. I think a piece of that too, and you alluded to this earlier in the conversation, but it's also yourself, right? It's showing up and being authentic and elevating your own voice as well in order to support others. So I think all of that plays a big role. I'm a big systems person. I'm really big on, what is it systematically that's not working, that's causing this situation, and addressing that head on and being really honest about that. I think, in order to elevate Black people in your workplace, you have to first create a workplace where they can be elevated, where they feel safe, where they feel supported. And so it's doing all the intentional work around that. It's not enough to just, kind of bring people in. You also have to have an environment that's going to support those people. So I think all of those things make a huge difference.
Wonderful. Thank you, Aliyah. Shawn, what is it you're doing over at Delta?
Yeah, I think the question is elevating Black people in your workplace. I'm a firm believer in there's invisible hands that help me to get to where I am. I'll never know the person who gave a scholarship A&T that I benefited in. I'll never know someone who was looking at my resume for my first job and decided to take a chance on me for an interview. So if there are invisible hands that help get me to the position that I'm in, then I owe it to either write checks, which I do, to give my talent, to give my time to others. And certainly there's a bias to help everyone, but there's a bias to help people that look like me who wouldn't necessarily have a chance. So being open, being transparent, but also talking to my white colleagues. We talked about it, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about it. What happened 4 years ago in May, right before Memorial Day with George Floyd. I think a lot of people who really care, who didn't know they needed to be an ally, they reached out. So it's being open to them and what they can do to drive the metrics and to drive performance. And again, I tell people it's not going to happen overnight. Some people think like, oh my God, it's going to be this Band-Aid, we rip it off and it's going to change. The system was built over 400 years ago, so it's not going to take place in a month or even 4 years, but we have to be persistent. We have to be resilient and show people there is a way, and don't get frustrated with it. So that's what I do, kind of, one, being visible, but being those invisible hands that help people get to where they want to be, and let them know that there is an environment, to be successful, in a corporate workspace, especially in travel.
I like that you pointed that out, those invisible hands. We never know a lot of times who those people are. Like you said, that gives you your first chance or provides that scholarship. So I like that call out, Shawn. That was great. We're coming close to time now, but what I did want to do is give everybody like a few seconds, maybe like 30 seconds or so. I want you to leave the viewers with something that you want them to remember, something to encourage them, something to inform them, inform allies, encourage people of color that help you along your journey. You're all very successful, wonderful professionals that I'm so proud of. So anyone can jump in at any time. I'm not necessarily going to call on anyone, but if you just want to leave some little words of wisdom for the people watching, please feel free to do that.
Should I go first?
Sure.
One thing that I always tell people is that when it comes to thinking of being inclusive or belonging, you close your eyes and you think about being on the playground and being that child that nobody wants to play with. And if we as individuals can help people not to feel that way, and that's, I think, our one mission is to try to make people feel inclusive no matter what. And that is my core mission, is to make people not feel like they're on the playground, that nobody wants to play with them. And it's always about being kind. I always think that I want to leave someone's day better, and that's what we should aim to do.
That's beautiful, Linda. Because everyone can visualize that. That's very personal.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I can share. I think it's really fantastic what Linda just shared. I think it's just the fact that we're all contributing in some way, shape, or form to this work and the work of belonging, inclusion, diversity, equity. You're doing it every single day. And I think that's one thing that people don't always realize. It's just, what is your contribution? What is the impact of your contribution? And having an awareness of that. And so I think it's just, if I want to leave any message, it's just reminding people that every day you're doing the work. Are you doing it well? And are you making a positive impact? Or is what you're doing really actually very tangibly harmful? And if you feel like you're not contributing, then it's important that you come to that awareness so that you're more conscious and more intentional about the ways in which you're contributing and the ways that you're showing up each day. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, you're going to have you would have had an impact on any one of these things. And hopefully the outcomes are for the best.
Thanks, Aliyah.
I can speak from a nerdy perspective. Honestly, I think measurement is so important, and like, don't stop measuring the stuff. Something that Shawn said earlier about like, this is centuries in the making. It's not going to be undone anytime soon. And I think it's really important to stay consistent with listening, yes, and research and measurement. And I think it's it can be tempting to think that the job is done, but it's not. There's still more to go. And I think, we're in it for the long haul. And there's like, anyway, measurement, data, all the things. Like, that is so important.
Well, Emma, sure, you're the coolest nerd I know. Okay, so Shawn started us off, and he's gonna close us out.
I was intentionally wanted to be last because I was the first one, not because I really have anything profound. But this panel was phenomenal. Thanks for being a great moderator. The thing that I would say, sometimes it can be very daunting, but I'm mindful of a couple of things, right? How do you eat an elephant? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. It can seem like you can't have an impact, but you can. Think of the movement that Rosa Parks did. That was one individual. Think about the Greensboro Four, what they did on February 1st in Greensboro, North Carolina, by refusing to get up. Think about where there was one individual or a singular group of individuals who made a big impact. So you can control it. When you feel frustrated, where you feel like that tax, that emotional tax or black tax is getting you, reach out to a safe space or friend. I think one of the things, if I didn't say it and I'm remiss, I had a lot of safe spaces I could go to when I was growing up where I could vent, where I could let off some steam that helped me reframe the situation and approach it in a winning way the next day. So that's what I would say. You can make a difference. You can make an impact. It is not impossible.
Thanks, Shawn. Well, I want to thank you all again. This was amazing. I really appreciate all your contributions. I learned so much from each one of you today, and I'm sure that our viewers will enjoy it as well and learn a lot. And I just profusely thank you so much. This was a wonderful panel discussion, and I look forward to working with all of you.